Hey, what?
The lift wasn't working and he was in pain, so I tried to lift him on my own. Yes, it's bad. I'll need help.
Can I help you with that?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Workplace injuries hurt the most at home.
With the economic impact of COVID-19 deepening, food banks across Canada are concerned about not having enough food to meet the demand, with many reporting only a 2-week supply remaining. That's why Rogers is partnering with Food Banks Canada in this critical time of need by donating 1 million meals for our fellow Canadians. Let's do what we can. It's time to step up to the plate and donate at foodbankscanada.ca. Together, we can make more possible.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jason Piercey. Says so, right there. And this is Out of the Fog, and it says that right there. Anyway, I'm excited about this conversation. We're going to sit down with the St. John's Mayor, Mayor Danny Breen. I got a whole bunch of stuff I want to talk to him about. I want to talk about the Pedestrian Model. I want to talk about the Ward 2 election that just happened very recently. I want to talk about money and what the city is going to do because it spent a fortune getting through Snowmageddon and lost a bunch of income over the pandemic and how all of that plays out. And then I want to get his opinion on privatizing Mile 1. All of that when we come back right after this.
You're watching Rogers TV, St. John's.
A victory they needed and a victory they got.
This is Rogers TV.
Let's start with one that is sort of on the top of my mind because, and that being the I was going to say the pandemic mall, which sort of worked out that way, but the pedestrian mall. And the reason I want to talk about that first is because in my mind, when somebody has a new idea and it gets put into action, and everybody's like, how come we weren't always doing this? That means it was a good idea to me. So can we start there?
Sure. Yeah, so, this was done once before. It was done in 1969, so it was about 50 years ago.
I wasn't around then.
Yeah, I remember it. I was a young boy. I remember walking up there with my father through Water Street. And it wasn't done the second time because, according to the reports I've read, and it was just too difficult. The challenge with downtown and with Water Street is that you have a very concentrated area with many varied business interests in there. So you have restaurants, you have retail, you have office buildings, banks, service providers, you have a whole range. So it became very difficult to do it again. So we've been talking about it for a couple of years now. I would say that I've been looking at it for the past 10 years since I've been on council and would really like to have done it again. So this year, with the pandemic and the challenges, particularly for the restaurants and bars, we thought in talking to some of the businesses and with downtown St. John's that this was a great opportunity to do it because it allowed them to be able to deal with their reduction in capacity. So we moved pretty quickly to do it. We did it.
Oh yeah, as soon as it was announced, it was just in action.
And we knew we were going to have challenges with it, but we said, look, we'll do it. Speed over perfection, as a friend of mine put it to me. And
done, not perfect.
It worked, and so I think it was a tremendous success. There was issues there that we just couldn't address as we went because they were a bit too complicated to deal with at that time. And there was varying degrees of success for businesses, depending on the type of business they had, how they dealt with it, what measures they took to take advantage of it, and their geographic location. And there
But
was,
I mean, there's also some business owners, just by the nature of their experience, their skill set, their own DNA, are going to be more likely to adapt and overcome the changes. Like the cream rises to the top. That happens all the time, right?
The other thing that happened is other business owners saw them do things, and then they got ideas on how to do things.
Yeah, of course.
So it really was an interesting thing to watch it happen. There were some businesses that certainly never did as well because of their location, and Duckworth Street businesses were challenged. But we generally overall the theory that I try to work with is that the more people we get downtown, the better it is for everybody.
It was blocked every day.
Yeah, and it was some interesting stats there. That too. The one I found interesting is that a lot of people that went to the pedestrian mall also went outside the pedestrian mall to other areas. Yeah. So it's interesting. I think resounding support from the public to do it again. Some more challenges for businesses, some of which never did great, some that did really, really well, and some that were disappointed with the whole thing. So we're taking all that information in that What We Heard document that was released just recently, and Council will take that in, and then we'll begin the planning and beginning to address some of those issues for next year.
Yeah, so if it were solely your decision on the feedback you have right now, you'd go again?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And but I can tell you that I can see why it was a challenge back 50 years ago trying to get to do it again.
Well, I can tell you one thing: it was some hard to buy lumber to do your deck this summer.
Yeah, it was a bit tough. But what's really interesting, I never got very many parking complaints, and that was the thing I expected.
I'm downtown almost every single day at this coffee shop or that coffee shop. Like for my real estate business, I'm cloud-based, so I don't have an office.
Yep.
So I'll go work out of a coffee shop or go somewhere for lunch and sit down with my laptop. I'm downtown almost every day.
Yep.
It never even occurred to me that, it was never that I couldn't find parking, ever.
Yeah, so the other thing that I think we need to look at is down the road in the post-pandemic phase, and look at some of the other things we can do there. Like I saw an interesting comment yesterday about the courthouse. Back in '69, when they did it, there was a stage set up there and there was a band playing.
Oh, that's
something that we couldn't do during the COVID restrictions, but something that in the future, having more street buskers, having more entertainment in the pedestrian mall became
and that's a great spot
possible.
for it too.
Yeah,
interesting. All right, so what else is interesting going on in the city of St. John's? We just recently had a council election.
Yeah, we had a by-election in Ward 2, and there was 8 candidates that ran. It was a very interesting election because, of course, in the middle of COVID, and how you adjust your election campaigning to that. But in the end, Sean Skinner was returned to City Hall. He served as councillor from '94 to '97, and then went in provincial government, served as cabinet minister back then. And so he's now filled that Ward 2 seat on council. So it's important that the residents of Ward 2 have a representative at the council table. And I've known Sean a long time, and he's going to be a great addition to council. And just wanted to thank all the 7 other candidates who ran and put themselves forward. It's not easy to do, but it's an experience you'll certainly savor.
Because some of the faces that had put their names forward would have been new to municipal politics. And they, in their own little spheres, they all had a whole lot of support because they were all about change and moving forward, like entrepreneurs, younger blood, stuff like that. And then after Mr. Skinner won, I heard people complaining that it was like the same old political sort of voice that we had always had before. And somebody made one comment that I found was very fascinating. Well, there were too many other options. So if you wanted new blood, you had to pick one of however many. And had there been less candidates, people who were a vote for change, so to speak, wouldn't have been so divided amongst people, because his total vote count was in the low 20%, I believe, right? So it's not a majority, it's just bigger than every other individual. And I found that kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it is. You know, I'm one that believes that the electorate is never wrong. The electorate always makes its decision, and so it was certainly a great victory for.
I'm not meaning to take anything from him.
Yeah, but you're right. You know, sometimes when you get that many into a race, then there's different vote splitting and those things that go by, which makes a case in some circles. And some people believe that ranked ballots are the way to go. I know that London, Ontario tried ranked ballots in their municipal election. And we waited for the experience that they had to see what, we could look at it. We wouldn't be able to do it. We would have to ask the province to give us the authority or the ability to be able to have a ranked ballot.
Why is that?
Because we're under the Elections Act. That's a provincial Municipal Elections Act. So we're reviewing what happened in London, Ontario. But interestingly enough, in the meantime, the government of Ontario has now not allowing ranked ballots to be used by any municipalities in Ontario.
Now, why is that?
The rationale was that they wanted to have the same system of elections for municipal, federal, and provincial. So that's their decision. But we're going to be reviewing what happened in London, Ontario, and then we'll discuss it as a council. Not likely that could happen for the next election.
Yeah.
Because it's also, there's a systems piece to this as well when you get into ranked ballots to be able to do it efficiently.
Oh, goodness.
And there's also a big communication piece to it too, to explain to people how it works. But it's something that I think has a future in politics.
Or even in like a maximum number of candidates.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't want to restrict democracy and the ability for people to run.
Oh, no, well, you could still put your name forward, but perhaps you need just to be, I know maybe it seems like a tiered system, but you need to meet a certain standing within the public to have a certain amount of names to be able to say yes.
Yeah, the number of names on your nomination papers.
Yeah, instead of just like nominated by one or two, like do you have 100? Do you have?
With places that have ranked ballots, you might see 20 people on a ballot. I was reading about one in London, Ontario that went 13 rounds in the ranked ballot system before they picked them. So what happens, though, gets really complicated.
I imagine, if
you're looking at that many names.
All right, so we've got a whole bunch more stuff that I want to talk about. Sure. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with Mayor Danny Breen right after this. Welcome back to Out of the Fog. All right, now, Mayor Danny, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about money. Like this, not necessarily yours or where you got those fancy shoes, but the city of St. John's, its current fiscal situation, post-Snowmageddon, because I think you said that was a $7 million expense?
$7 million.
And then this global pandemic and all of that shut down. I mean, your revenues from multiple streams must have been affected.
Yeah, it's been a really challenging year. Starting around, I think it was January 19th or 18th when we had the major snowstorm. And after over budget, we were $7 million over budget on that. We're still working with the federal government and the provincial government on disaster relief funding to help with that. But that does take time, so we're still working through it. The pandemic has just came on in March, and it has created another huge issue for everybody, obviously, businesses, residents, and the city.
All right, girls.
Mom, you said it's played again.
Workplace injuries hurt the most at home.
There's no greater support than a loved one's embrace. When you participate in the Kidney Walk or support someone who does, you're showing your loved one you've got their back. Whether you're counted on for trips to dialysis, for a transplant, or to lend an ear, there's no end to the support you give. When you walk, you demonstrate just how endless that support is. Register to walk at kidneywalk.ca.
Well, in 2022 is the next assessment year, so the next reassessment. So that's January 1st, 2022. The values are based on January 1st of 2020. So that's before Snowmageddon and before the pandemic.
Yeah.
But still, compared to the 3 years before that, or the 2 years, they will be down from there. So then you have to adjust for that loss of revenue.
So, yeah, I mean, it's great for people like myself. I'm like, okay, you don't have to pay, instead of paying, say, $3,800 in taxes, maybe now you're paying $3,550 or $36 or whatever. But you do that for 250,000 people or something, and that are all a couple of $100 lower, and that's 75% of your revenue. That's a lot of money.
That's why development's important, because you need to develop, you need to have the development happening in the city, because that's what generates the property taxes, and that's what takes the burden off the existing property taxpayer, and also allows us to invest in the things that people want in the city.
Yeah.
With that cost that are expensive to build.
So speaking of investing into the city and development, got a second to talk about the concept that privatizing Mile 1, specifically with the conversation that Dean McDonald has been saying. Can we talk a little bit about that? And maybe you don't have to speak necessarily as the city of St. John's, but like what are your thoughts?
You know, Mile 1's an important building, an important operation to the city. It provides a tremendous amount of economic development. It does have an operating cost that the city bears through taxation, but it also generates an economic dividend for the businesses in the city. It generates economic activity. So the restaurants, bars, taxi companies, suppliers all benefit from that. And the benefit far exceeds the amount of operating costs that's paid by the city for that. So the challenge is how do you make that work the best you can? And I'm personally am open to any type of opportunity that's in the best interests of the residents and taxpayers of the city. So what we've done with this is the board of directors that operates Mile 1 has a subcommittee of the board made up of citizen representatives who are guiding through this process, engaging a consultant to look at how this would look if we were to entertain the selling Mile 1.
So how it would look from whose perspective?
From how the process would look.
Okay.
What are the things that we'd have to look at? Like some of the concerns that have been around is if it's owned by a private operator, how do you ensure that that it remains Mile 1 Centre? It was a $52 million building to build, probably cost $80 million to replace. So if you're going to privatize that, how would you do that, and what are the important things to consider in your decision to do it? Because it's not something that's common or if done at all throughout the country. So that's where we are with that right now, and after the board does their work, then it would come back to council for further consideration, and we'll see what happens then.
So some of the things that you said relating to how it's a really big, like a business, you didn't say, an economic development piece for the city of St. John's, and the spin-off across everything that goes on in and around whenever there's an event. There's always somebody having a beer or food before they go. There's always an after party, after show, or and I mean, you've got all of these professional sports, like all these athletes that are now living and spending and existing in our city. Regardless of who owned the facility, wouldn't that still be relatively constant?
Yeah, that's one of the things that you would look at, and you would hope more, because one of the advantages to private ownership, of course, is risk.
Yes.
The owners are more able to take risk with bringing in acts and bringing in entertainment than a city would with taxpayer revenue. So that's one of the advantages that you look at with that. But then there's larger events like the Briar, for example, that required a lot of public investment into that, and some of that public investment was done through some of the cost reductions through the rental of the building, because the city owned the building at the time and was able to make that all work. So there's a lot of different facets to this, and you know, what we really need to do is we really need to sit down and look at all those things to make sure that whatever decision's made at the end is made in the best interests of the residents and taxpayers in the future of the city. So
to be very sort of black and white, cut and dry about it, if an independent third-party consultant were to say to the City of St. John's, we think economically speaking, both the city and its constituents would benefit from this being a privately owned operation, and then the people of the city said that they would like to see that happen, is that what would happen? Well, what would happen is the first thing they'd lay out, my understanding is that they would lay out the issues that you would need to consider in doing this, and then we also would have some public engagement with the residents on this whole notion. And then you would have a public process, because it is a significant piece of taxpayer-funded infrastructure. You can't just have one person bid on it. No, you would have to do a public process. It had to be a due process, sort of. So, you know, it's not it's by no means a quick thing, but it's a huge decision, and it's not as simple as just saying, here, take the building. Yeah. It's one that got to be well thought out, because whatever your decision is one that you're going to have for a long time. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mayor Danny Breen. It would be really cool to see somebody spend tens of millions of dollars downtown doing a big construction thing, though. Absolutely. That would be incredible. Thank you very much for coming out. Always a pleasure. Thanks, Jason. And we will be right back after this.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Welcome back, folks. I'm always so grateful that I get to have conversations like this about people surrounding our communities and our province in general. One thing that I really, really appreciate about Mayor Danny Breen is that he will always say the thing as the thing is. Like, he might have found a really political way to say that taxpayers fund Mile 1's operation, but he did say that taxpayers fund Mile 1's operation. And he also said that if all signs point to it being better for St. John's and everybody around it, if somebody like Dean McDonald owned the thing, then that's what we do. But he'll go about it in a fair way, and that's why I like Danny Breen. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Life flows.
My mother said we had to leave home. The communists were going to take my father away. If my parents were afraid, they didn't show us. But we would never